Hey everyone, it's Mr. Soto coming at you with a video about Unit 2 class structure and design. Specifically today, we're going to talk about arithmetic operators. So if we go down in lesson 7, we'll go through operators and expressions and just kind of look at how we work with numbers and string, and specifically with numbers, how do we use different arithmetic operators. So let's get going. On the first one here, basically what we're trying to do is you'll notice that it's kind of an odd um, lesson we're going to look at because we're not creating a subclass or anything here. We're just merely creating a tester class where we're going to do some math. I'm going to go ahead and run this code just so you can check it out while I'm talking about it. And kind of the main thing we should remember is that we have a bunch of different data types we need to consider. So we have the int, which is talking about integers. And here we did 5 divided by 2. Right, we have double, which is a double data type, which is taking a decimal and dividing it by an integer, and kind of exploring all of the different outputs from there. In terms of for this lesson and also for the College Board, there's really a couple key things you need to remember. First one, I want to focus just on lines 4 and 5. When you create what's happening in line 4, and I would encourage you to do this yourself if you want to pause it, is we created an integer variable called divided and it's storing whatever 5 divided by 2 is. So let's take a look at what the actual output is. So if we go up here, I'm going to go ahead and, or I can't clear the version history yet, but do you see what's happening here is it's going to go ahead and come down here on line 7 and say, hey, will you print me whatever 5 divided by 2 is? Now, you and I both know that 5 divided by 2 on the calculator is 2.5. However, keep in mind that this is an integer. So even though 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, Java only has a storage bin essentially available that will store an integer value. So what's going to happen is you're going to get something called truncation, where 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, but it's going to go ahead and cut off anything after the decimal. So 5 divided by 2 is only 2 as far as Java is concerned, because we have an integer that's storing it. If we look at line 5 here, we create a double where we're going ahead and we're dividing 5.0 divided by 2. Well, what's happening here is we have a variable that is ready to receive a double or a decimal data type. So when we do 5.0 divided by 2, it's going to take whatever 5.0 divided by 2 is and keep it a decimal. And that's how you're going to get 2.5. That's a pretty key difference to remember. It's small, but it's going to come up on the AP exam. They're going to give you some sort of situation where you have to divide by 5 divided by 2, and it's going to be an integer, and you have to know, ooh, for an integer, we're going to truncate whatever comes after a decimal. But if it's a double, we're going to go ahead and keep it. And when we do a decimal divided by an integer, it really matters on where that's being stored. In this case, there's a storage bin that's ready to receive a decimal value, so it's going to keep it as such. So the way Java treats integers and decimals is pretty different, so we need to pay attention to that. Trying to think what else. Let's go ahead and go to the next one because this will come up a couple times. In this case, they just kind of want you to play around a little bit with the various arithmetic operators. So I just want to kind of hit on the high level ones, and you'll basically be able to play around a little bit with each of these. And I highly encourage that. But just in the interest of time, I want to just kind of go over the main points here. You have to remember with plus signs that these are like on lines 10, 11, and 12. Those are addition operators. So that's working. 3 plus 5 is 8, 3 plus 5.0 is 8.0, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. We're going to look at what gets printed out in a minute. But something to keep in mind here is line 14, 15, and 16. When you are taking a text and you're printing it, and then you do a plus with a number, that is a concatenation. Well, and we know that because we can't take a text and add a number to it. So let's go ahead and run this, and you're going to see how it just gets chained at the end. Okay, so there's a lot coming out at you. Obviously went through line 7A, so I'm not going to worry about those again. But let's look at the number 8 here. That is 3 plus 5. But check out what happens when I just print merely 3 plus a 5.0. Let's go and go ahead and keep it and convert it to be a decimal. Same thing with the line below it. So the main thing to keep in mind is when we do integer plus integer, the output when you print it is just an integer. But when you take an integer and add it or do an arithmetic operator with a decimal, the result will be a decimal. And obviously decimal plus decimal is going to be decimal. Check out what line 14 is spitting out and 15 and 16. High, the word high, plus 5 is going to give me high plus 5. It's going to give me high 5. And it's going to go ahead and shove those two together. So this plus sign is a sign of a concatenation. Same thing with version 2.0, right? 7 plus teen is going to scrunch those two words together. So concatenation is just a fancy way of saying we're going to chain those two things together. That's it. So let's keep moving along. Let me just make sure I cleared everything out. I already did this once, so I want to kind of start over with everything with you. And again, what we're going to do in this one is just take out the prints. And you're going to go ahead and take a look at all this. The main thing I want you to pay attention to, I add the code down here, is we're going to do system.out.println. And you're supposed to go through each one of these. So I want you to observe. The main thing I want you to pay attention to is because one of the things that comes up in the College Board or from the College Board is they're going to test you on the order of operations. Let's take a look at this guy right here. So what is 10 divided by 7, this percent sign, 2 minus 1.0, yada, yada. There's a lot going on there. So what I want to do to show you the order of operations is we're going to go ahead and remember what I call PEMDAS. And I use a lowercase m there to kind of make the point. Because we all know from math, there's PEMDAS, right? So we do parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. Well, this percent sign is what we call a modulo. And basically what it's answering is it's answering the question, what is the remainder after you do the division? So in this line below where we did 7 mod 2, the question we're asking is, what is the remainder after 7 is divided by 2? Okay, so you have to kind of think back to, third grade or fourth grade. But 2 goes into 7 3 times, and it leaves a remainder of 1. So what I know is that 7 mod 2 should equal 1. Let's try that out just to test it before I print out what's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do system.out.println because I want to see what it's actually doing. And we're going to do 7 mod 2. Let's see if I'm right. Is it going to be 1? So that last number should be a 1. And there it is. Ta-da. You'll notice it's an integer. Just for fun, what if I change 7.0 to a decimal? Will that change anything? And it does. You'll see we divide it, or we do if we were dividing 7.0 by 2, you would get a decimal answer. Let me show you that one more time. And then when we do a mod, although it's going to be an integer, you'll see it come up as a decimal anyway. And there you go. So again, Java likes to prioritize if you're going to give it a decimal and divide it or do something with an integer along with it, it'll prioritize not trying to truncate if you give it a decimal. But if I did just 7 divided by 2, as we've seen before, you're going to get the answer is 3. And there it is. See? Okay, so we still haven't talked about PEMDAS much, so let me go back to that. So now I'm going to do 7 mod 2. Let's go ahead and subtract 1. So I'm curious to see, is the answer going to be 0 or is it going to be something else? And the answer is going to be 0. Well, if we did 7, so think about it this way. Let's see what the answer is if I did 7 mod 2 minus 1. And then I did, let's do 7 mod, and I'll do parentheses here, right? Because that's going to contain the 2 minus 1. Because 7 mod 1 should be 0. And it gave me an error. Oops, because I typed in, I don't know what I was typing in there. That's a typo. So see, the answer is 0 because what I did, let's see, 2 minus 1. Oh, whoops, let me choose something else. So 6 mod 2 would be 0. So 6 mod 1 would also be 0. Let's do 9 mod 1. Let me choose a different number here. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here. Let's see, 3 minus 1 is 2, so it'll give me back to what I need. If I did 7 mod 3, 3 goes into 7. 2 times leaves 1. Sorry, let me just make this an 8. I'm trying to find out different remainders, so there we go. So you can see the difference here, and let's just walk you through it one more time. So 8 mod 3, this shows me that 3 goes into 8 2 times and leaves a remainder of 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. In this case, 8 mod 2, so 2 goes into 8 4 times, very clean, right? There's no remainder, so that would be your 0. So this is showing me that the mod happens before the subtraction. So 8 mod 3 is prioritized before we do the minus 1. So again, PEMDAS is what you need to know. We're going to do parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, then we're going to do mod, and then add and subtract. You're going to kind of keep going through this, and I think I really want you to just kind of play around with the code and just do as they say, copy and paste and note the observations. Okay. The main thing I want you to know is that the way Java treats decimals and integers is very important to understand. So when we take an integer divided by another integer, the result will be an integer. It'll cut off what's after decimal. If you take a decimal and divide it by 2, or if you take, or sorry, by an integer, so a decimal divided by or decimal anything with an integer will create a decimal answer. Now, just for fun, what if I took a decimal and just added an integer to it? Right? We haven't explored that yet. That will give me, so it's actually double 5 over 2 is 7.0. So you'll see it remains as a decimal. So that's really interesting to note that. It, I mean, Java tries not to go through lossy, data or through data loss. So you'd rather not do truncation, right? Here, I'm going to go ahead and show you, but when you divide 12 by 0, you're going to get an undefined. But if you took a number, okay, so if we did system.out.println, and we did 12.0 divided by 0, see what happens. You get the word infinity. But if I did just straight up 12 divided by 0, you're going to get an error. And there you go. Right? It tells you can't divide by 0. But when it's in decimal, it'll give you an infinity. So it's really important to understand that, again, decimals are treated differently than integers. It wants to prioritize using decimals over integers. And that's kind of the gist of it. I'll let you again play around with these types of things, and let me know if you have questions.